Pulisic scores and wins the Milan derby. Haaland hits 100 goals and no home run for Leo Messi in the Bronx. This is the Morning Kickaround. Morning. Welcome to the very first edition of Morning Kickaround, an American bite at the world's game. My name is Robert Kerr, up from the lower leagues. Very happy and proud to be joined by one of the foremost voices of soccer in America, Mr. Jason Davis.
Wow, lots of pressure, Robert. Thanks. Foremost. I don't think I've ever been called foremost anything. Foremost jerk face? Maybe. By my child, of course, by my kid. Dad, you're a foremost jerk face. Anyway, thank you for introducing me. I'm glad to be here. Ready to do this. Let's see what we can make Morning Kickaround be.
Morning Kickaround, 9:30 Eastern Time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It is Monday, September 23rd. I am glowing. Every single one of my sports teams in all the leagues across soccer and non-football teams won this weekend. How about yourself? How did you fare in between the lines this weekend?
Well, let me think about it. Fulham won. Very happy about that. My American football team won that for the first time this season. We're not talking about it, but I'm glad that happened. Atleti drew. Not too happy about that one, but you take what you can get, I guess. I'm pretty good today, Robert, on that front.
Pretty good today. Hopefully, we're going to have some fun here as we progress, getting this show rolling. If you want to support, we're just getting rolling. Like and subscribe to the channel, Morning Kickaround on YouTube, morningkickaround@gmail.com. If you want to get a hold of us here, questions, comments, concerns, partnership opportunities, all of the above. And of course, the social medias. We dadded up pretty hard, but we try to dabble into the socials at mkickaround on the X and the Instagram.
If you want to call me foremost jerkface, you can do that through these opportunities to connect. That's how you do that.
Yeah, what's your favorite platform to be called the foremost jerkface?
I've been called something like or worse than foremost jerkface on X many times over 10 years. So, why not? Why not keep it going? Keep it rolling over there.
All right, let's keep it rolling, and let's start off with our first segment of the day, the big headlines here on Monday. Let's go to those long balls. All right, long balls here on Morning Kickaround, the biggest stories of the day. I'm going to throw this one up long, go Route 1. And can Jason Davis bring it down and run with it? Christian Pulisic is becoming AC Milan's best attacking player. Scored in a winning effort at the weekend. What do you think? 31 goal contributions. He's leading the way in Serie A.
Yeah, 31 goal contributions since the beginning of last season, which I believe has him tied with Lautaro Martinez for the most of any Serie A player. Now, I haven't seen this. This is a stat that's getting thrown out everywhere, and rightfully so. Obviously for us Americans, Robert, we want to fly the flag. We want to go, rah, 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 USA, look at our guy go. I don't know how this compares to, Erling Haaland probably has 812 goal contributions since the beginning of last year. Some of these other guys, Kylian Mbappe, name your player, Vinicius Jr. I don't know how that compares to other great players across Europe, but considering the thought, the things that were dogging Christian Pulisic when he arrived in Milan at the beginning of last season, after the Chelsea period, things had soured. He wasn't playing. He had been injured quite a bit. All of these things, people didn't know if he could reach that top level again. He had some moments. I think that we were hanging our hat on, okay, he scored in a semifinal against Real Madrid in a Champions League. There were no people in the building. There were 3 ushers ushering nobody back then because of COVID. And it was okay, well, how good is Christian Pulisic? And I still don't know. We're going to talk about this a little bit deeper coming up in a later segment, but I still don't know exactly where I rate him. But man, he's on fire. That goal that he scored in the Milan derby, which ultimately AC Milan won, which was not expected. right? Everybody thought that Inter was going to crush Milan in that game because of just form and obviously defending champion versus an also ran. The fact that he took the ball the way he did and made that goal his, and that wasn't a cheap goal, that wasn't a tap in, that wasn't somebody, somebody doing all the work and setting him up. This was Christian Pulisic making that goal happen. I was incredibly impressed by that.
Yeah, he went full alpha mode there. He turned, saw his opening, split the defense, and finished with a flourish. And we haven't really seen too much of that, to your point. I mean, we've seen him be in the right place at the right time and maybe be opportunistic. But that, he really took that moment by the scruff of the neck.
Well, I mean, look, okay, we know he is excellent in space with the ball at his feet. We know he can beat players off the dribble. Finishing, I think it's a strength of his. But I don't know that if you were saying, hey, name the top 25 or 30 finishers in the world, people would get to Christian Pulisic. He might not be on that list. And maybe that's because of his position as much as it is about the kind of finisher he is. But you would have a lot of other players before him. And in this game, and obviously in the Champions League loss to Liverpool, he proved that when he takes on that opportunity, he can finish in a way that, makes you a great player, right? We as Americans are hesitant to start throwing around words like great and phrases like world class about American players. So some people may be jumping to that. And I don't know, again, like why we have to wrestle with it. Let's take the guy on his merits. And sure, he couldn't do this at Chelsea, but I think so much of this is clearly about the circumstances that he was facing in London. And he has a team that believes in him. He's had, obviously, now multiple managers who have continued to give him opportunities. There was some talk going into this game, of course, that Paulo Fonseca's job might be on the line. And I had some Milan people tell me that, hey, it might not even matter what happens in this game. Fonseca might be gone. Now, I don't know that they can fire a guy who just won a Milan derby against Inter when they weren't supposed to. I don't know if that's possible, Raz. I think Zlatan Ibrahimovic is supposed to make this decision, right? He's the one now in charge at Milan. Does anybody know what's really going on there? But the fact that, again, the fact that he continues to get opportunities, that he's playing for one of the biggest clubs in the world and not shrinking from that moment, and he's outperforming the it kid at Milan in Rafael Leao over the past 2 seasons, says a lot about Christian Pulisic.
When he's healthy and been in a good situation, I mean, Pulisic has flourished. But speaking of another it kid on the British Isles, that guy Erling Haaland hit his 100th goal in just 105 appearances in what turned out to be a 2-2 result. Man City versus Arsenal.
So do we think that he is 100% artificial, or is he a cyborg, or is there something higher level than cyborg? Does this involve like some biohacking situation? Exactly what is Erling Haaland? That's what I need to know, because this is obviously it's ridiculous how many goals he's scored for City since arriving, and to do it in this game, obviously, there's been this thing that has dogged Erling Haaland a little bit, that he can score goals against the weaker sisters of the Premier League, that he can beat up on some of the lesser teams, and he'll score hat tricks. I mean, he had 2 hat tricks in a row. Can he get a third? Obviously, he didn't. He got 2 goals in that game, right? He got 2 goals in that game. So he had a 3-game run with 7 goals. Against the type of teams he was scoring against, it was like, okay, of course, those teams aren't very good. Now, it's also fair to say that nobody else has scored like Erling Haaland at that rate in the Premier League, regardless of whether they were doing it against relegation fodder or mid-table teams or whatever. But he scores on the biggest stage against City's biggest rival for the title. It's a great pass from Savinho. It's a great finish. It's what Erling Haaland is the best finisher in the world right now. I don't think there's any argument about that. And yeah, a 100 in 105 games is... I don't know how to explain that. That's not supposed to happen. He broke the game.
If he stays healthy, every single record that still remains will be his. It's important to note that Ronaldo at Madrid did the same 100 goals in 105 games, which is just unreal. But we're seeing numbers that we haven't seen in over a decade.
Well, so let me ask you then, though, because, okay, Ronaldo at Madrid, and as much as I love La Liga, and I think a lot of people respect La Liga, and you would say that, in terms of the technical ability that's on the field week to week, La Liga may be the best league in the world for that. But I think we would all argue, or would all believe that the Premier League is deeper, right? The quality all the way down the table from 1 to 20 is the highest in the world. Like, there may be 5 or 6 or 8 Bundesliga teams that could beat any team in the Premier League. There will be, those things are true, right? Bundesliga, La Liga has some very good teams at the top end, but what they don't have is the depth all the way down the table. So for Ronaldo to do it at Madrid, it feels different. And Ronaldo was a machine too. But I'm not saying that Haaland has passed Cristiano Ronaldo. Clearly, he has not in terms of world status and greatness across a career. Haaland has lots of years left ahead of him to continue to prove it, and Ronaldo was so consistent. But man, I think this is a more impressive achievement, than what Ronaldo did at Madrid.
It's hard to say that, but I did also want to ask, other than City fans and just like stats nerds in general, is Haaland a likable player? Other than just like being in awe of his achievements, is he a likable player?
Well, it's interesting that to bring Ronaldo into this conversation then, based on his numbers at Madrid, because I think Cristiano Ronaldo was also that kind of player, that he divided opinion. Now, that was a lot about preening and ego and public image and all those things that made Ronaldo kind of off-putting, whereas Haaland is not that player at all. But I think he's got, for Americans, since we'll make it about us. That's what this show is going to be about, by the way. Yep. Our motto on Morning Kickaround is we're going to make it about us, meaning American soccer fans. Erling Haaland has very strong Mighty Ducks bad guy energy, right? He presents as this villain from a kids movie from the 90s with the blonde hair and the ponytail and just the Nordic thing about him. And you kind of don't want to root for that guy. Like, and obviously you throw in the City factor as well. And you cannot disconnect Erling Haaland from City and what he's doing because they are dragging those 115 charges around with them that are now getting their hearing. We know them as the dominant team of the Premier League over the last 8-9 seasons, whatever it is now. And people are tired of City. Like, please, somebody. I had a conversation this weekend with a guy who's a Chelsea fan, so I didn't, whatever. He chose poorly, at least in my mind. I'm giving a hard time. But he said, I'm tired of City. I just don't know a way to knock City off their pedestal. But because the late goal changed the complexion of the match, and now a draw feels like a loss for Arsenal, that's going to be the narrative, and it's hard to like Erling Haaland in that context.
Yeah, late goals, the theme. A lot of late goals across matches in all of the leagues. Coming home to the States, another late goal split the points. Messi, Suarez, and company went to Yankee Stadium this weekend, where Inter Miami thought they'd stolen 3 points on the road, but NYCFC featured a late equalizer to take some of those points away and damper that win in front of a huge crowd of over 44,000 at Yankee Stadium for a soccer game.
Yeah, I mean, it's fewer games than the Yankees get when they play against, I don't know, name a mediocre baseball team. I don't know my baseball at the moment. But I would say, what this means, Inter Miami is going to win the points title. They're going to win the Supporters Shield. That is a near certainty right now, right? I don't know what the math says about that, where we are on their magic number to clinch the Supporters Shield. But what it probably does is it means that they're not going to break the points record, which I think is still the Revs from a couple years back under Bruce Arena, right? So this is still a team. It's one of the more remarkable seasons in MLS history, and I don't mean to say that Inter Miami is the best team we've ever seen in the league's history. I'm saying that the way this has unfolded, the fact that they remade that roster, the fact they keep adding these players, and you're like, how are they doing that? And they have this mix of obviously these world-class players from their careers in Messi and Suarez and these guys, obviously the trio from Barcelona coming in changed the complexion, but they have also got some younger players that are making significant contributions. And I wonder how we're going to view this down the line. Obviously, it depends on the playoff run. Like, it depends on whatever happens in the playoffs. They won the Leagues Cup last year. whoop-de-doo. I mean, it was fun to watch Messi step in to Major League Soccer and guide his team to a victory, but they were never going to make the playoffs. It was too much. It was too big of a hill to climb for them. In this case, they have been atop the table for so long that anything less than a championship is going to feel disappointing. And yet, if you are watching MLS, you know that the Galaxy are damn good. You know LAFC are really good on their day. You know that Columbus probably plays the best soccer in the league and is not close to a supporter shield this season. And so you can't discount them. And if you are just one of those people who maybe started paying attention to MLS because of Messi's arrival, you might go, oh, look, Columbus, they're 8 points back? They're in third place. They're probably pretty good, but they're not Messi, Inter Miami good. No, they probably are. And it's going to be fun to watch when we get to the playoffs.
When folks ask you about Inter Miami, how do you explain it to them, the people that are trying to get into MLS? Because people definitely see that Messi has Suarez and Busquets and Alba. When people ask you, how did they build that team in MLS? How do you answer that question?
Wait, are you asking me to explain MLS roster rules and budgets and
to a layman? Because I've been asked that, MLS teams don't usually have players like this, do they? And it's like, they change the rules if for the right opportunity and the right person.
Well, look, it's like what's happening with LAFC, right? We're like, oh, okay, they added Olivier Giroud. Oh, how do they have Hugo Lloris playing goal for them? Well, the location, the lifestyle, the fact that those players have oftentimes made a ton of money already makes it a different proposition for them. I mean, this is something, it's one of those things that kind of feels unfair, but obviously isn't, because you can't do anything about it. You can't level the playing field unless you are allocating players, and then those players won't sign with MLS because nobody wants to be allocated and not choose their own destination. But Bruce Arena said this not that long ago, that it was about the Galaxy. It's like, there's no excuse for not being good in Los Angeles, because players want to live in Los Angeles. You should be able to get a higher caliber of player for a better value than most of the teams in the league. And that's not to say that there aren't some very nice places to live, but most players coming from Europe in particular, and probably from South America too, are going Miami, Los Angeles, maybe New York. That's it. That's the list. You should have no reason not to be able to compete at a high level in Major League Soccer if you are in those cities. And that sometimes the simple explanation for how did they fit that player under their cap is that player took a very, very, very big salary cut in order to play in that place. And Chris Henderson is leveraging it in Miami, and Will Coons is leveraging it in Los Angeles, and John Thorrington has done a good job of it in LA as well. And you see the results of it right now.
So layman's terms is, it's Miami and they already made their money.
Yeah, man. They made a bunch of money. They want to live in Miami. In the case of Suarez, in the case of Busquets, in the case of Alba, they want to play with Lionel Messi. Now, Lionel Messi can command whatever he wants. Lionel Messi can have the entire league if he wants to on some level, because he's got that kind of star power. But for these other guys, if they want to continue to play and they want to live in America and they want to have one last chance or two last chances, depending on how old they are, to make a run at a championship. And that's the thing about MLS. It's attractive for reasons that are difficult a lot of times for us as Americans to understand, because we're not coming from a European, South American mentality.
Thank you, Jason. 3 long balls sent your way, brought them down with incredible success.
Not with my hands. Not with my hands, with my feet. You can't see my feet, but I did do that. Thank you very much, Robert.
Yeah, the Americans kind of struggle with bringing down a ping ball sometimes, but I'm glad to see my new partner here in the mornings able to take care of that, have such a deft first touch with all of the long balls. And sometimes those balls come in hot, and we're going to move on to the hottest topic of the day. Hang on tight, right around the corner. Let's switch it over to today's hot topic. All right, our hot topic, the biggest topic of the day. We're going to dig in just a little bit and go and dare to circle around the heat and the fire here on Morning Kickaround. If you're just tuning in. I'm Robert Kerr. He's Jason Davis. Do we dare huddle around the Flames. Christian Pulisic, is he world class? The topic of the day. Feel free to put a comment there on the live stream on the Morning Kickaround YouTube channel. Jason Davis, Christian Pulisic scored in Italy's biggest club fixture over the weekend and then scored against one of the world's best clubs in the Champions League. He's healthy, in a good position, great form. Does this make him world class?
Wow, ask a tougher question, Robert. Ask a question that doesn't send an American spiraling when it comes to our view of our players and our place in this game and how everybody else. I mean,
it's day one, baby. You got to start hot.
Oh man, this is so tough. I mean, what's my typical response to this? I think in the past would be to say something like, "Well, what is world class?"
Or get out of town.
What does that even mean, Robert? World class. How do we define that? And I do think that there's something to that, right? Everybody's got a slightly different definition of what world class is, right? Nobody wrote this down. It's not chiseled into stone on the grand temple of football. This is world class. This is how you define it. We don't have any numbers. If you cross this threshold, then you are world class, right? We don't. It is a subjective label that is applied subjectively. I think there have been times when it has been liberally applied and sort of slapped all over the place. That player's world class, and you're like, wait, what? No. And I saw it defined today. I think a random comment, maybe in a Reddit thread or something, and it was like, world class is the ability to walk into any team in the world to start. No matter what team you get dropped into, take Christian Pulisic out of AC Milan and drop him into any other team. Would he start for that team? That's world class. Now that makes world class an extremely small group of players.
Yep.
I'm not even sure. I mean, we're talking Rodri. We're talking probably Erling Haaland. Although, again, sometimes it's about, how do you fit the system? I mean, I don't want to. That's another complication. I think of world class as are you wow, this is okay. As I stall here, you tell me, what is world class before we answer this question?
To me, world class is if you were making a starting 11 and maybe an 18 for Earth versus the galaxy. Who is in contention to make that all world 18? And if you're in the conversation to make that list, you are world class.
So it's an 18-team list. Okay. 18-player list. So you're saying a game day, a match day roster, you're dressed for this match.
You are in the same class if you're on the bench as the starters more often than not, especially when you're at this high level.
Okay. So this is almost like Space Jam kind of thing. Like the aliens have showed up and they want to play a football match to figure out who gets to take, whatever, who wins. I don't even know how Space Jam works. Never seen Space Jam. Look at that. I can't believe I'm admitting that on this live show. Never seen Space Jam. But that's what it is, right? Like the aliens show up, they go, we've got our 18 players. Who are your 18? Would Christian Pulisic be in that list? Man, I'm going to say no to that definition. I hate saying no. I do. I hate saying no because I think, here's the thing again about being an American. He's as close as we've ever had. Like he's obviously as close as we've ever had. And you could argue about goalkeepers, and I'm not trying to diminish our goalkeeper history. Those guys, some of those players, Casey Keller, Brad Friedel, Tim Howard at times, incredible players, great goalkeepers. But man, we don't judge ourselves as American soccer fans. Are we thinking like, yeah, man, I'm so glad we have no, goalkeepers are like, whatever. We've done that before. We don't care about that. We want outfield players who rank among the best in the world. And he's close. He's close. It's okay. If you were doing it on form, he might make that 18. If you were doing it on form right this minute, right now, you had to put the players that are in the best form up against those monstars or whatever they're called. That's Christian Pulisic might be in that conversation. What do you think?
So if he's playing down the left-hand side, I mean, what left wingers in world football would you pick if you were picking our
Well, he plays on the right for Milan, so this is complicated, right? This is another complication. He plays on the left for the U.S. He plays on the right for Milan. He has Rafael Leao playing on the left side when he's at AC Milan. He obviously there's been a rotation. I mean, Tim Weah would be your first choice for most people, but there's been a rotation for the U.S. men's national team. I mean, this weekend it looks like Fonseca went to a 4-4-2 because he wanted to get Tammy Abraham and Alvaro Morata on the field, which pushed Pulisic into a nominally midfield position, which, again, it scrambles things a bit, right? Because you think of Pulisic as a wing player, a wing forward in a 4-3-3, because that's what his club has played or his country has played most of his career and his clubs for the most part, or at least something in that variation, so a variation of that. But that doesn't, if that changes, well, then that changes, how much defending is he doing? It's complicated. It's complicated. I want to say yes, Robert. I want to say yes. Christian Pulisic, world class. Why not? Let's own it. Let's because you can make the argument. This is the thing. You can make the argument. Some people would shout you down. And if you're being extremely limited in the number of players that count, if it's only 18 players, he probably doesn't make that cut. But if world class is more like 3 teams worth of players, or 2.5 teams, or whatever, 50 players, Christian Pulisic's probably in that group right now.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, like I said, my definition was in the conversation. So if you're even debating, you're making a short list of it, and you're anywhere close to it, I think you're in that class. Maybe you didn't get picked, but you're in that strata.
By the way, here's the stat that people are talking about, because we did prepare this. This is the goal contribution since last season among Serie A players across all competitions. So there are some qualifiers here, but let's look at this. So that's Christian Pulisic, 31. The goal against Inter was his 31st. Lautaro Martinez picked up an assist in that game as well. So he's on 31. Rafael Leao, 30. Romelu Lukaku, 29.
So he's in the top 3 attacking players and probably top 4 league in the world. Yeah. So he is in that upper third echelon, a leader at one of the leading leagues. He is definitely on the short list for world class.
It would help. This is the thing about his situation too. It would help if Milan was better, right? Like AC Milan is a top 15 team in the world right now, probably. Right, I'd have to think about it a little bit more deeply to get to where exactly they fit into that. But if you were ranking, and I don't have coefficients, UEFA's coefficients in front of me. Those are based on international competitions and other things. But if you're just talking about, like, if we were doing this AP style, like college football, and we were ranking the best teams in the world, Inter Milan's in the top 15, pretty safely, I would bet, if we think about it. But they're not winning titles. Inter's the best team in Italy over the past couple seasons. Napoli has a title in the last couple seasons. Milan hasn't done enough in international competitions, obviously being knocked out of the Champions League last year, for us to feel like they rank among the best teams in the world, right? They're behind Liverpool. They're behind City. They're behind the top teams in Spain. They're behind Bayern Munich and probably Dortmund and Leverkusen. So it makes it tougher because we naturally ascribe world-class status to players who are playing in teams that win things or are challenging for those top trophies. And that's not Milan right now. And then you get into this weird place of like, well, maybe Christian Pulisic's not good enough for those teams that are actually challenging for trophies, which I don't think is true. Again, so much of this is circumstantial. And he did win a Champions League at Chelsea. So I don't know, Robert. I'm going with yes. Why not? Yes.
You like it? Yes. And for the American fans or soccer fans and American audience that don't watch, Serie A in and out, I mean, that was an upset this weekend. Milan beating Inter, that is an upset. I mean,
huge upset. I mean, it's so wild to say that, but but again, I do a radio show. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm also on Sirius XM FC on a daily basis. And we talked to people last week ahead of that game. And one of them, Martino Puccio, said, no chance. This is not going to happen. He's a Milan guy, and he was so down. He was so sure that this was going to end in pain for AC Milan, that to have Milan win that game yesterday feels transformative. Now, I don't know. I think Inter still is going to probably win this title. And I don't think that Milan has enough in the Champions League to really make a dent. We saw it against Liverpool at home. They just weren't good enough. But maybe it's a formation change. Maybe there is something. Maybe, I mean, again, defending has been their issue. Midfield has been their issue. You add more bodies to midfield, the way that they did yesterday, and maybe it changes things. And you had a world class moment. Is he a world class player? I don't know. World class moment from Christian Pulisic on the goal. You get a set piece goal. Hey, things can happen. Things can happen. And Inter had their chances, but Milan found a way to win the game. That's all that matters.
Yeah, and maybe we'll have to revisit this conversation later in the season because he might be having a world-class moment, and he's in world-class form perhaps over the last week with a Champions League goal and this huge goal, and maybe Milan can push and, challenge, and if he continues this rate of scoring and goal contributions, we may well have an easier way to say yes to the is Christian Pulisic world-class question. Any parting thoughts on this? Like, what would he have to do? Like, is there a goal total he'd have to reach to really blow the socks off?
That's a good question. I mean, he plays in a position where, he's not going to rack up a ton of goals, generally speaking, but he is capable of scoring. Obviously, again, we talked about the goal contributions. 31 is not, that's goals plus assists over the last season and a couple of games now. Look, if he hits 20 goals in Serie A this season, and with 12 last year, 12 and 8 in the league, and you'd have to sprinkle in the international stuff as well, the European competition. If he gets to 20 goals, I mean, I don't think there's any question at all. I mean, I think Lautaro Martinez had 27 as a striker last year. If you get to that number in a league as good as Serie A, I think that pretty much seals it.
That would be certainly exciting. I hope we get to do that show at the end of the season there, Jason, where we're in the no doubt of Christian Pulisic world class. So hot topic. Let's put the fire out and move on. We have segment 3 on the way. Culture Wars is up next on Morning Kickaround.
You take the banner down first. That's what you do on a live show. Go ahead, Robert.
All right. It is the first episode of Morning Kickaround, and we're rolling out the gates on Culture Wars, one of the most contentious segments on the show coming your way. And one thing that really sticks out as we're watching European soccer and watching the Premier League is the American influence, especially at the ownership level. 9 of the 20 teams in the Premier League, and in maybe even more with talks of Everton perhaps being bought out by an American group. So this brings me to the culture war subject of the day. What happens first? A complete makeover of the Premier League business model or promotion and relegation in the United States. What happens first, Jason?
Wow. Well, okay, let's first say that while we have a question of whether or not the United States has a world-class player out there right now, we definitely have some world-class money being thrown around by ownership groups and the private equity firms and all those things. I don't know that. I mean, it's interesting that you present this as this question of the Premier League business model. I don't even know if I know what that means, Robert. And I mean, maybe you meant it to be pretty open-ended, because the Premier League right now is going through this massive upheaval over what makes a healthy football club, how clubs should act, whether clubs should be allowed to spend their way to a higher level if they're not generating that money from income that the club itself can find, right? So this is the PSR question. This is the financial fair play question. If I buy a soccer club and I have billions of dollars at my disposal, should I be allowed to just give my money basically to the club and spend it all to make my club better, or do I have to find a way to I mean, it all feels very money laundering kind of vibes here, right? This is what we're talking. I don't know that that's what it is, because it's so out in the open. But this idea of like you have to balance your income versus your spending and all those things. If that's what you mean, if the business model, meaning will it change in a way that is closer to that, or gets that becomes more normalized, or maybe a salary cap is coming, I find that really hard to believe. And yet the American influence could push us in that direction.
I mean, the Premier League is governed essentially by ownership, and they vote on things. The ownership of each club votes on things, and there's been some more radical American-minded things proposed to these the board members. And you feel like if the Americans had the majority, if there was ever a time that like a hard salary cap or spending
Yeah.
limits or some sort of a ceiling on what is possible for these clubs to do. Obviously, we're seeing it. It's a little bit murky with how teams are being punished for not being within these guidelines. But looking at, I was looking at an article, I think it was from Sportico, and they kind of just like run down the list of all the losses that these teams come
Yeah.
across.
Yeah.
And then they juxtapose that with these American owners like the Glazers and Stan Kroenke, but you compare that to the money that they make on their American franchises. It's night and day, like gargantuan losses on the soccer side and then gargantuan gains on the American side. You feel like the American owners are going to have kind of one thing in mind.
Well, it makes you wonder why they're buying into football clubs if this is the way the balance sheet looks, right? I didn't go to Wharton or anything, but I get the basic idea that you don't want to lose money. If you have a business, the idea is to not to lose money. So why would American owners, why would anybody, right, buy into a football club if it's just going to hemorrhage cash? But yeah, maybe that's part of this, that there is this idea of let's push it culturally, let's push it towards. Well, first of all, I think there is an idea among American ownership in particular that the sky is the limit, that there is no ceiling yet defined for these clubs when it comes to their global brand power. Manchester City, lots of Manchester United in particular, Liverpool, they've made huge inroads in Asia, right? We know this. They go on Asian tours, they're mobbed. There's millions and millions and millions of fans in Asia following the Premier League. I think the idea is, from an American perspective, we're not even close to tapping out the American market when it comes to soccer, right? We see all this growth, and you and I, over the course of this show, are going to be talking about all those changes. And I've been doing this, talking about soccer, writing about soccer for a decade and a half, and the amount of changes that have happened in terms of the popularity of the sport are ridiculous, and they're huge. But you still have to look for somebody to talk about soccer with as an American. You still have to put yourself in the right situation to have that conversation. It's not obvious yet. People don't wear it on their sleeve as much as they do with their NFL team or their basketball team or whatever. And I think that these owners, whether it's the Bowley and Igbali at the Chelsea group, or Friedkin here, or Redbird in Milan, or any of them, they see a possibility of exploding their team's popularity in America, which means that if the balance sheet looks bad now, it doesn't have to look bad in the future if they make the right moves. It's a gamble. It's a risk, clearly. But I think they're seeing that. I think that's probably part of what this is. And yet, that doesn't mean they're just going to say, well, let's just allow everybody to spend like crazy. And in order to be good, we have to chase the dragon by spending. They will push for rule changes. I mean, maybe it's a luxury tax. Maybe it is a hard cap. Maybe it's a soft cap. What also complicates this, I think, for everybody involved is the problem of competition. If you're the NFL, if you're the NBA, if you're Major League Baseball, you can say, let's have a cap or a tax or some sort of limit on spending, because we're not fighting for the attention of our fans with clubs in Japan or in Mexico or wherever, right? That's just not a thing for the NFL. It's not a thing for Major League Baseball. That people aren't like, well, the MLS, Major League Baseball teams don't spend as much. They're not as interesting. I'm going to go support I don't know. I'm trying to name a Japanese baseball team, and it's not coming to me. But you know what I'm talking about, right? That's a thing in soccer where you have to, and for players too, right? It's a lot about the player market as well. In order to get the best players, you have to spend more money than anybody else, because there are 50, 60 other clubs in the world who can spend that same kind of money or close to it to get that talent. And I don't know what that means for how American owners will view their role in changing the way English football operates. But the other side of that coin, the thing you asked about with pro rel in America, I just don't. I don't see a path to. It's not that I don't want it to happen, and this has been my position over the years on pro rel. I just don't see a path to it. I don't see a world in which owners willingly choose to put their teams in relegation jeopardy unless the money available through that would completely change their business model for the better. And I don't know how you see that as a possibility.
When you talk to people and you explain to people that are getting into soccer, most folks that I run into really like the concept. The concept of promotion and relegation is exciting. You know, if a team is bad for a number of years, they go away for a while. And if they get good again, they come back. People are
they don't
excited.
go away. They don't go away. They're not like banished to the shadow realm or something, Robert. They're just, they're in a lower. You could still watch them. It's just a little bit harder, maybe, to find their games. Come on.
And then people who are asking me about like how it all works, think about, so if the American League standards were applied to England, a city like Birmingham, one of the second or third biggest city in England, a team there would just be locked into the top division if it was
right.
solid. And yes. Aston Villa and Birmingham City were pretty rotten for a long time. And so the Premier League would have Birmingham City or Aston Villa just locked in there. And the league would just have these teams just hanging around, and it would just gum up the works. But Aston Villa, there was changes made. They improved, and here they are back into the top third of teams in the Premier League. And I was just saying that opportunity wouldn't present itself over here stateside. And when you put it like that, people get really excited. But people that are business minded, they're saying, that team Aston Villa, they were dog bleep for a long time. And now they're losing money. How would they ever sustain themselves?
Yeah, I mean, man, this is extremely complicated from where the inception point is for American soccer, right? The promotion relegation began because you had more teams than you could fit into a operational league, a league that could actually be organized in some sort of reasonable manner. And so they said, okay, we'll create a second league. And if you win that one, you get a chance to move up to the top league. American soccer didn't have enough teams for that for a very long time, right? And now we do, and that's a great thing. But then it becomes, well, how do you integrate this? And I'll tell you, I mean, again, this is sort of separate to the conversation about American owners in England and whether pro rel would come here. But one thing I consistently talk about is that America, in all of our sports, American sports are based on a league which then populates itself with clubs. So a bunch of rich guys, and this has happened in every sport we have, a bunch of rich guys get together and they say, hey, we should have a baseball league. Okay, great. Where should we have teams? Oh, Bob can start a team in Baltimore, and Joe can start a team in New York, and Tom can start a team in Philadelphia, and then we'll play each other. That's great. Let's go do that. That's different than a bunch of workers or a bunch of college kids getting together and forming a club in 18 whatever, as it was in England. I mean, it's a very different inception point. Those are clubs that then went looking for a league and then decided to operate. So everybody's viewpoint is the club is the most important entity, and then the league serves the club. That's not how we do sports in America. It's the league, and then the clubs are sort of like, oh, well, we'll expand here, we'll expand there. And so and then you also have this issue of how do you get different business entities? This is just a practical concern to work together, to choose to integrate their leagues, because we've got MLS, we've got USL, we've got all these other, we've got NISA, the alphabet soup of American soccer, and all of them think that their way of doing the sport is the best way. And they're going to say, yes, we're going to voluntarily merge our leagues in some form or fashion. And it's hard to imagine. It's a cynical take on my part, but it's hard to imagine us getting there.
Yeah, but it is cynical, but I think that the environment produces justifiable cynicism.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you look overseas compared to here, we are taking the American angle here, and we want on this side of the Atlantic to be working in the same direction for a common goal. But you made the point, like everyone's kind of working to their own championships, to their own ends, and not all pulling in the same direction. And then through this show, I hope that we are able to explore maybe not ways to do that, but the benefits and how at least explore those different goals and see how we might be able to pull in the same direction.
Yeah, sure. I hope so. I hope so. And again, the sport continues to grow and get more popular. And if that continues to happen, then there could be pressure. There could be waves of support that could get us moving in those directions. And I respect anybody in American soccer who is working towards what they think is the proper ends of where this game should go. But there are obviously differing opinions on that. And it's not like everybody involved in American soccer thinks that some open system with pro-rel is the best way to go. There are plenty of people who don't care about that at all because they are conditioned to think of sports the way we think of the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball. Your team's always going to be in that league. Every single year, your team is going to be in that league. And the only question is how good will they be? And there's this thing about it's been mentioned here today that your team, there are bad teams in every league in every sport, and you might come into a season thinking really they have no hope. But a majority of teams at least believe that they have a chance to make the playoffs. And then, hey, what happens in the playoffs? Who knows? We could win a championship. And you brought up Aston Villa, and Aston Villa's in a different place. And maybe Unai Emery is changing the complexion of Aston Villa to the point where you can imagine something bigger than just staying in the league or maybe making Europa League or Conference League. Obviously, then the Champions League this year because of what Unai Emery did. But the idea of Aston Villa winning the Premier League title seems insane, right? At this point in time, it seems insane. Even as good as they are, there's no real belief they're going to win a title. And that's a different mentality of sports fandom that I think is fascinating because a lot of Americans are adopting European clubs. But you're making a choice about what level of fandom you're going to be able to enjoy, what level of success you're going to be able to enjoy. I've decided to adopt Fulham this year. Like I fully went in on Fulham. I've been dancing around picking a European team or a Premier League team for a long time. And I was like, okay, well, maybe Fulham. All the American connections. Again, we make it about us. All the American connections, lots of reason to like Fulham. But they're never going to win a title. And if they get back to Europe, that's about the best I could hope for. Is maybe they get back into a European competition one day. Like, let's just stay up for now. Let's just do that.
I mean, you said that England is kind of coming to terms of what's a sustainable club, and fans are trying to come to grips of like what is ours and is the ownership going to take this club away. So just to list the Premier League clubs that have American owners, and most of these have all benefited, by the way, from this, or they've improved their foothold. Arsenal, Villa, Bournemouth, Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Fulham, Ipswich, Liverpool, and Man United, all on that list, Premier League teams. And then Everton might make it a 50-50 split with 9 more in the championship and plenty of others spread across the continent.
Yeah. Maybe Wrexham is going to be a championship team. They've got American ownership. Okay. You bring this up. I think it's interesting that you mentioned all those teams that have American ownership, but I think it's also important, and I'm not quite sure what it means yet, but it's important to point out that there's a different style of ownership from American owners when it comes to some of those teams. I mean, you have the Glazers, who as a family own Manchester United, right? Now they've sold a portion of it to Ineos and all that stuff, and it's a little bit different now than it used to be, but still, the Glazers own Manchester United. Whereas Chelsea is majority owned by a private equity firm, right? They're owned by a group of investors, essentially, with certain people empowered to be the leaders at Chelsea representing that ownership stake, right? Todd Bowley's got a portion of the club, but he's a minority shareholder in the team individually. There is Clearlake that has a much bigger share. You talk about, I mentioned Redbird at Milan. These are not like, oh, billionaire Joe Thomas owns the club. That's not the model. The model now is these are investment vehicles for these groups, and that changes the complexion of how they're operated, right? I don't know exactly how that's going to play out in every case, but I don't like that impersonal element. If the club thrives, I guess the fans don't care, right? If your club is bought by the private wealth fund of a petro-rich country, then and you win trophies, I guess you don't care. But again, the complexion of club ownership has changed a lot over the past decade or so.
Yeah, so to get to the top, the hardline question of this Culture War segment, what happens first, hard American rules in the Premier League or pro rel for USA?
It's the hard rules in the Premier League. I think the chances of that happening anytime soon are fairly slim, but pro rel's not coming to American soccer. It's just not.
The public pressure would have to be, borderline the what was it, the Super League, where all the fans had the crazy protests, like large scale protests, and English folks are not public protesters by nature, so that shocked a lot of folks. And can you really see like a fever pitch in America for this sort of a wholesale change?
Only way it happens, as much as I would love for it to be a function of fan pressure, the only way pro rel comes to the United States in men's soccer is if a broadcaster, whoever is going to basically fund the league through purchasing television rights and media rights, says, we'll give you lots more money if you institute pro rel. That's the only way it happens. And then there would be some really tough negotiations that would have to happen between very clearly distinct business entities in a country where antitrust law makes it very difficult to sort of operate as a one unitary group in power over the game, right? That's something that is legally extremely difficult in this country, but that's the only way it happens.
U.S. Soccer Federation moving out of soccer, or moving out of Chicago, out of the soccer mansion, kind of takes this daydream away. But I always kind of thought, like, when the United States didn't qualify, I thought that they'd replicate the march towards the mansions in Chicago. When everyone revolted, like had the workers' strikes in Chicago, and they burned down the mansions of all the factory owners back in the day. I thought that we'd have to replicate that in Chicago to get pro rel. And moving away to Atlanta,
the million soccer fan march, is that what you're imagining, Robert? Maybe we can still put that together. Somebody put up a thread on Big Soccer. Let's go.
Yeah, that's a topic for another day. Thank you so much for tuning in to the very first edition of Morning Kickaround. We are doing this show Monday, Wednesday, Fridays at 9:30 Eastern time. If you're watching this on replay, hope you enjoy it. We are going to be posting clips up on socials throughout the day to access and share all this content. And if you want to get a hold of us at Morning or M Kickaround on the social media, and then the X and the Instagram at M Kickaround. And then if you want to write us a little letter, questions, comments, concerns, morningkickaround@gmail.com. Thank you to Brooks and Luke for the comments on the YouTube channel for our pilot debut episode. Your viewership is greatly appreciated.
Please like and subscribe. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you're watching through the Best Soccer Show channel, obviously that's my other thing I do with Jared Dubois. Shout out to Jared for being cool with us posting this on the Best Soccer Show channel. Eventually, we're going to be moving away from that, and it's going to be Morning Kickaround on YouTube, where you'll need to watch the show every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So like and subscribe on Morning Kickaround. If you're not watching via Morning Kickaround, go look for it. Should be very simple. We're already there with a couple of videos, our intro video and now this one, so you should be able to find us. Good time. Almost perfect today, Robert. Almost perfect.
The long balls were kicked. We went to Hot Topic, and we warred the culture. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you Wednesday, 9:30 Eastern time.
Yeah, there you go. We will talk to you soon. Bye.